What we got planned this evening is we're gonna take a few minutes and let everybody look at the three locations of the 13 we've had evaluated. To take, we're gonna take comment on three locations. Then we're gonna have a short presentation on those three locations. And then we'll try our best to answer any questions that you've got. So go look at all the spots. We'll be, and everybody be around. We're gonna keep this real informal. Go look at the three locations that we've got presented, make your comments, ask questions, whatever you need to do, and then we'll have a short presentation on that. And then we'll have another Q&A. So, real informal this evening.
And just so you know, too, there's sticky notes at each table. If you want to make a comment and just stick it to that plan set, that's fine too. Or there's also a pad of paper. If you want to sit down and write a comment, please, by all means, whatever you want to say. We'll take about 15 minutes or so, and then Mr. Chad Simmons will do a presentation on the site.
It was. Well, thanks.
Jason, which Jason Hawkins, he works with those kids, their designs. David works with in the chat centers where they speak in the language of the region. He works with Mosley, he does the civil side and the cyber. They're doing a great job, and looking at these guys, we're anxious to get that. What about, they're taking, we're anxious to tell them the here's what we're gonna do. They've adopted a real difference in what I appreciate, so we'll see.
Yes.
That's what I thought was that. So if you're driving, you're the car behind the side. Driver's like, you're. Oh, wow.
Yes.
But we know too.
The internet has been down. I get to use my hotspot.
That's really stylish. I have him word please during all of this.
Oh, sure, sure. Right. Of course, the internet will go out all the time.
If that's your fault and they're gonna get dropped.
Without question. Always my fault. I am the internet, therefore I should be able to provide the internet.
Yeah. Well, take that. That's great.
We did these.
About 2.5 years.
She was in private.
Yes.
Internet with them.
Really? You're serious?
Yep. So I'm having this on the hotspot.
Can you use it up for this?
Yeah, but you see, I'm plugged up. It's out. County internet with them.
Well, that's 10.
I mean, it is. It is.
Well, soon, when we start this presentation, you can move the chairs that I can't see. PowerPoint.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to the board and the public for coming out tonight and having me come out. It's a pleasure to present some more details on these three properties right here, maybe run through a little bit of a summary of what what I want to do is, let's start with Tallulah Road, Site 1A. Want to run through this one and just to orient you a little bit about where this is at. If you are driving on Tallulah Road, heading out of town to the south, this is on the right, to the right of the State Employees Credit Union. Okay? So if you'll scroll to the next one, Jason. It's about a half a mile from downtown, which has been as we've gone through this process, that's been very important. Express that any location that is selected be reachable to Robbinsville, right? So this is only a half mile downtown, so good access to major roads. So you've got good north, south, east, west access via Tallulah Road. Site development costs. Now this one of the three final, this one we're estimating to be the most expensive of the three. However, relative to a lot of the ones we were looking at out of that 13, it's more inexpensive than Lowestoft. So I think that was one of the reasons to let them make the cut. So it's about 50% higher than base. When we first started this process, we developed a base site plan with this base site development cost. This would be the optimal, the ideal site development cost. It also helped guide us in evaluating sites to make sure there was enough good useful land available to help us keep those site development costs down. So access to utilities, State Employees Credit Union is right there. I believe there's water and sewer across Tallulah Road adjacent to Tallulah Creek. Well, water might be in Tallulah Road. We're presuming that there's sewer next to Tallulah Creek as well. So I wrote down here second best expansion capability, the site's evaluated. So that was at the time that we evaluated this one. It has pretty good expansion capabilities on the site. There's plenty of room at the front of the property between the proposed Justice Center and the road. So there's room to breathe, right? So one of the things that is driving up that cost a little bit higher than the other two sites that made the final cut here is the fact that it's sitting below Tallulah Road. There's potential for flooding down there. It may not have ever flooded. This is just from our view, seeing that it's sitting below the road. You've got the road oftentimes can access an outlet or a dam, especially if you build an impervious area, you back water up. And we're trying to avoid a flooding situation in the future by going ahead and lifting that site up above any potential flooding, reasonable potential flooding. So we're seeing some additional costs there. Also towards the back of the site, it starts to rise pretty quickly. There's always the potential for rock. Anytime you're placing on fill, that's great. Less chance of impacting rock. But anytime you start cutting into the hillside, start hitting rock, that can drive costs up. So that kind of touches on some of the detriments we talked about, the potential for flooding and the potential for rock. And I don't know if I'd call it a detriment, but it is certainly of the three. It looks like it's probably going to be the most expensive to develop. All right. So let's jump to, that was site number 6 in our order. We're going to jump to site number 9. And this one we're calling the Old Tallulah Road property, the Cody property. Just to orient you as to where this is, if you're driving out on Tallulah Road, Airport Road's on the left, across the creek, and another left on the Old Tallulah, and it's on the left. Okay, so it's kind of, if you're looking at that picture, you got Old Tallulah Road to the south, you got Tallulah Creek to the north, And a little bit further to the north of that is Tallulah Road. All right, next slide. So benefits, again, it is pretty close to town. It's about 1.7 miles from town, 4-minute drive. Good access to major roads. I think anytime you're going to be on Tallulah Road, you're going to have quick access to the major north-south corridors and east-west corridors in the county. We've determined that there's water and sewer close by. It's on that side of the creek, Tallulah Creek. On the, I believe that's the east side of Tallulah Creek, there's water and sewer available. There's also power available back there as well. It's always good when you can locate your development next to utilities. And site development costs are not quite as high as what we were expecting on the Tallulah Road project, 1A. So we're estimating that in the $2.5 to $3 million range. Not expecting a lot of FED on this one. We are expecting some fill though, because it is in the floodplain. A portion of it is. We want to pick that site up to a point that's required by law to get it up above the floodplain to minimize potential for flooding in the future. Detriments though, because of that floodplain, it's just going to be a little bit harder to expand this site. There is some room for expansion. It's not terrible, but it is a little less limited, or a little more limited, excuse me, than the Tallulah Road property. So beyond that, potential for flooding, of course, due to the presence of the floodplain. And then off-site improvements. So this one was a little bit particular. Jason, will you go back to the previous slide? I do want to talk about this one. I want this on the screen here. Old Tallulah Road right here is very, very narrow and it does not have much right of way. We want to make sure that our emergency responders have good access to a site so that they can get in and out quickly in case of an emergency. I would be concerned about sheriff's deputies exiting that site or even entering that site in a hurry with the road in the condition that it is. I would estimate that road is only about 15 feet wide, maybe. Ideally, that road needs to be probably 26 feet wide or more, especially with the curves in it, right? So that's going to mean additional cost to acquire right of way to build that road and widen it out, additional grading and all that good stuff. So now the county will have to deal with those property owners on either side to acquire the right of way to widen out that road. All right, and then Jason, will you go to site number 12? All right, this is the Knott Street site, and if you came here tonight, you're probably very familiar with it. It's right next door. This is the baseball field right over here. And this site plan that we have on this presentation is a little bit outdated. When we did this, we looked at potentially separating the sheriff's office from the detention center and locating it in this building with a renovation. Since then, we got some direction from the board. Go back and look at what would it look like to have the sheriff's office attached to the detention center. That's always a good idea to have those two attached. It cuts down on response times. If you have an emergency in that detention center, you've got the sheriffs right there in the building or in the same building, basically right next door. They can run over and deal with the situation quickly. So the site plan that you saw here tonight, right over here, does show the sheriff's office right next to the detention center. Okay, so that's the only difference between, it's not the only difference, but it just looks a little bit different with the current. So let's go to the next one, Jason. We'll run through the benefits and detriments. All right, so this site is located, it's right in town, right? If the goal is to get this project as close as possible to the center of town, this is really close. Good access to major roads. It's a pretty good shot right up here to 143 and then to Tallulah Road north and south. So you've got good access. Utilizes county-owned property, and I understand the property is in the ownership of the school system, and I know that there are some moving parts with regards to potentially the school relocating at some point and what happens with the ownership of that land. But I'll defer, to the county to answer questions on that. Water and sewer is nearby, right? I just took a walk right out here before this meeting and confirmed that there's sewer down Knox Street, there's water right in Knox Street. It's right out in front of the development site. And, site development costs, this is of the three, the expected to be least expensive of the three. There is additional cost in raising the site up. It is in the floodplain. It's in a mix of the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. I would want to pick that site up enough. It's not as much as what you saw on the original Tallulah Road Site 1A. It's not as much of a lift of the property, but it is not insignificant. And then one of the things that helps us control costs on this one a little bit too is the potential for overflow parking on court days. There's parking here in the administration building, and there's the potential for parking on the other side of the library as well. It just depends on how that works with other uses going on those sides as well. But in our opinion, there exists the possibility of coordinating parking on those other locations, in those other locations. And the expectation is that's not an everyday demand. That is going to be more of a demand when the court is in session and the public is coming out to attend court, and those folks are probably going to need a place to park. So we're seeing that more as a temporary overflow situation. Detriments, building configuration is slightly different than the original concept. We want to work with Mosley in partnership to make sure that what we're adjusting is still the most optimal building layout possible. Again, scratch that you can scratch that measurement because now the one we're looking at, the sheriff's office, is now attached to the detention center. Detriment additional grading, but I'm not sure if that, or everybody don't put that in as a detriment, to be honest with you. It's just on the borderline of being just what you would expect in the course of sorry. Low potential for future expansion. Jason, will you go back to the previous slide? I do want to talk about this a little bit. If we were going to put the sheriff's office in the, well, let me just put it like this. If you just restrict the site to the Justice Center, just to the ball field, there's not a lot of room for expansion at all. However, if you consider the administration building as well and the future possibilities that opens up to the site, should county administration relocate to the original courthouse, I know that was an idea that was kicked around early on in this process. Then you've got more room for expansion potential. One other thing, you can leave it right here, Jason. I do want to say this. This was a detriment, and I did hear a comment. Ninth Street has never flooded. But as you can see, Ninth Street is in the floodplain. Okay, we can't raise, well, we could raise at Ninth Street, but that would be a tremendous cost to pick that street up out of the floodplain. A less expensive solution is to construct a secondary access drive across the back of the site that comes out on the 143 above the floodplain. So it would not be in the floodplain. So that would allow emergency personnel to get to the site in case of a flooding situation along Long Creek. And then other detriment too would be, it just depends on how much you need that baseball field, right? But that baseball field would go away in that location. All right, that's all I had on these three sites.
Does anybody have any questions, comments? On specific site or sites?
There were several of us that were discussing the fact that two of these sites were in proximity where children will be. And there is one that does not have that law. Is that being discussed or considered? One is near daycare, one is near the elementary school. And while it may be good in the future, that could be years away.
It'll be moved before this ever function.
Okay, what is the anticipated date for this to start?
Construction,
Yes,
I would say probably if we made a decision today, year, the construction.
Potentially could be starting the building.
Yeah.
so when is it anticipated to be finished?
Well, the school actually received the grant to build in the elementary school. That's what. So essentially, our hope is that the constructions will be at the same time.
Well, my concern about the one that's going to be considered for location here is then you have the high school stadium. And that is a historical, place around here. And, what are you gonna do about the children? And those children run all over the place during the ball games. And you have the JV, and you have, like I said, you have hundreds of children running around. And you're going to place this facility within proximity of all these children and these football games. And that's a good something.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the library's there too, and they have a lot of children. In the library.
We know that that's an issue.
I just know it's going for the second of July.
Jacob, I know that we're finally, premature in maybe talking about this yet, but if we're talking about the school going to be moved and going to start be on a new site, and that's going to leave this building vacant. What is the plan for that? Is anybody even started? I mean, because then you're going to need to think about, all right, is there going to be residential and retail in there? Is there going to be somebody living right there? Then we're going to have the courthouse and all that right here on top of them.
Well, we would most likely acquire a good part of that campus for the future expansion.
To be used for the judicial system.
Or county emergency. But that's not set in stone by any means. The way we're looking at that campus has a means to explain in the future.
So you can see that possibly being part of the future expansion for this ideal at this location.
Any other questions?
So we will decision be made.
Very possibly tomorrow. At a regular meeting.
Is there a deadline to get it?
Yesterday. We're under a judge's court order, so we're at the mercy of our superior court judge. We've been at this for 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, so they expect us to pick a path we have.
Well, I guess one big question for me is you're going to create a logistical traffic nightmare while you're under construction here. Because I mean, you can't even move through this place for this pickup time at the elementary school.
That would be a logistics issue that they're going to address.
So from my understanding, there are two sites that really allow for expansion, correct? This site and the Tallulah Road site.
They would all allow for some expansion. Yeah.
But generally, there's two that allow for a generous amount of expansion. Each one of those sites, like the cost of expansion, so if you looked at just the cost of expansion from site to site and compared those, could you give us your thoughts on which one of those sites the expansion will have the lowest amount of cost?
It can vary just depending on what you want to do. If you look at this site right here, let's say you wanted to build something new instead of, let's say you, on this particular site right here adjacent to the ball field, if the county administration building, the county decides this building doesn't serve the purpose that the county envisions anymore, and wants to move the administrative services out of here, you already have a pad ready site. You got parking around it. Potentially, you could just build a new building here or renovate this building. So there is, there's variations in levels of cost. It may be if you envision a completely different use that would cause you to rip up all the pavement too, that would be additional cost, right? Versus, say you've got a green site out there on Tallulah Road. It just depends on where the expansion is, how much site work there is, and I don't see a whole lot of difference between them in cost. It just depends on what the vision would be for expansion. Sorry for deflecting a little bit, but that's a long way of saying I thought that.
Oh, so one of my questions was in the side breadth of the other side, could you already like be essentially covering some of the cost of expansion in that side? Even though that's a more expensive side, maybe that extends actually buys you savings, essentially as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest costs are going to be in just grading. So if you know that you want to go ahead and create an area that's going to be pad ready, so to speak, for expansion, there's certainly going to be cost savings. I'm not aware that there's a whole lot of downward pressure on construction costs. We have seen some, that was before the hurricane came through. So we have seen some in the past downward pressure on construction costs in general. Don't know how long that's going to continue, who knows, right? So the things that you can do when you're developing a site to make it more expandable is clearing and grading. Right? Go ahead and bring it in the dirt, put it at the finish, put it at the level that you want to build at. Go ahead and clearing out brush and trees, and go ahead and making those allowances. But in the grand scheme of things, those are probably some of the cheapest things you can do to a site. Relative to asphalt, concrete, sewer, storm, buildings, moving dirt, clearing trees, that's pretty low cost, as long as it's not extreme.
So what size of facility for this place is allowed?
So
What
when
are we
we,
looking at?
so the facility itself, I'm gonna let Jason Hopkins answer that question, but with the ideal site we were looking at was in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 acres is what we were looking for an ideal site.
Well, maybe one break, how many beds are going to be in the town as prisoners is that? On any one of these sites?
We've not made a final decision on that. That's gonna be.
Is that still being, the potential of being able to recoup part of our costs by having extra bed space here?
On the little side, does the house out front, is that part of the cost of buying the property or? The old house and the apartments that's sitting there in the front next to the road?
I'm gonna defer to the county on that one, see if they want to address that.
Talking about the one up next to the state boys, correct?
Yes.
That's side.
I would assume it's all part of it. Sold and bought. As you've talked about.
Yeah, we don't have a set. We negotiated the price.
But the house would be included in the cost of whatever we pay for that property. So we can do away with the house to have that area for.
That would be what we can do.
Well, you know what, also we have on a 3-lane road.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to do no road construction, we only got a 3-lane road coming all the way down to Lucas.
There's sewer and water both at some of them already, isn't it?
There's sewer and water on every side.
Was the property price included in that construction cost?
We don't have any set property
So
price.
we don't have any ballpark figure of what they want for this land.
I mean, there's not set in stone now. Everything's still negotiable with the property.
So this price doesn't include any,
Not land
Property.
acquisition.
no land.
So if you chose a site, would you declare eminent domain in some of these properties or?
No.
Okay, so if someone said, no, I'm not gonna sell my property, so would you just go on to another site?
I mean, I don't think that, and I don't want to speak for this board, but I don't think this board has any of that way in their minds right now. I don't think one of these sites stands out so spectacularly more than the other that this board would go that route, but I don't speak for this board. And I will, if I can ease your fear with proximity to children. And I get it, I do. It was one of my concerns too. Even up at the P&J property that they looked at, that developed as a recreation. When the school moves, and they go to move, the only time that there would be children would be your football games
In the library.
and the library. These folks would be confined, without the sheriff's department's deputies. And, you know, we've had our festivals in downtown for years, you know. Plenty of kids and folks roaming around in the public
Sure.
with an active courthouse and jail there.
Yeah.
So, you know, if that eases your mind any, but I get the concern. We know this board has discussed that in great depth. It's on these properties to have that issue.
May I jump into, when we were laying out that Ninth Street property, one of our considerations was the football field, the library, potentially the school period of time as well. And so what we did is when we went back and reattached the sheriff's office to the detention center, we put the sheriff's office on the end of the detention center that's between the detention center and the library, between the detention center and the football field. So there is a buffer between the detention center itself and the south, and that would be the sheriff's office. And the only buffer I could say exists between the detention center and the school on the hill is the hill itself. And the fact that's how far up the hill is that, 30 feet or so. And so that hills can have a good effect on sound control, but in the end, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but modern detention centers don't have the yards. See, you know, you saw in the movies back in the 70s and 80s, right? There's not guys out in the yard pumping iron, playing basketball with a razor wire fence. That doesn't exist anymore. Those folks they have an outdoor yard space, but it's enclosed on all sides with a solid wall. Is that correct, Jason? I don't want to speak out of that.
That's absolutely correct. A lot of people think of prisons when they're actually talking about jails. And there's a huge difference in how they're designed.
Yes.
So a jail and a detention center are basically the same thing. It's meant for short-term, pre-adjudicated confinement. So you've been arrested, you allegedly committed a crime, now you're waiting to go to court, so you're put in jail if you could. You do have some people that stay longer that can serve some minor sentences out in jail, but they never leave the confines of the jail building. So going out in the yard, playing basketball, there will be a fence around it, but the fence is not to keep them in, it's to keep the public from walking up to the building primarily. So they do have indoor recreation spaces that are open on top of a secure mesh. You know, anything can happen, but escapes are relatively rare in modern detention centers.
Anything else?
So, they mentioned the fence. Does the fence have like a barbed wire around it? Where's the boundaries? Having it open?
Well, that would be determined later in design, what style of fence, how high it would be. I mean, our most common design would be a 12-foot fence with a concrete strip at the bottom like the most strip, which you can dig it under it, in or out. And some counties, some plants offer the razor wire, like the coils on top. Some don't want. Some don't like the institutional appearance, but then some really want. So that'll be a design decision made later.
I wonder about, like I said, it's children, because whether you like it or not, Big Oaks is there. People are there all the time. What are we looking at when we set razor wire on the top of the fence and kids are walking by us with that? And people in general, when they come and visit, always look at, are supposed to pipe fence with razor wire and there's strip underneath.
Well, it may or may not have razor wire. That's the design.
Yes,
decision of the-
hypothetically, but
Not all the facilities in design have razor wire. Some do not have fences. Because we do put detention centers in urban areas, and there's not enough property to actually fence in. Iredell County is a good example of the jail engine years ago. Only a very small portion of it is fenced in. The rest of it is open to the street. Guilford County, North Carolina, is the same way. Is that right, Young County?
Well, another consideration should be that we have a window over here. that children go to all the time during the summer. And that's where they're walking distance going to Lawson. Just, that's, to me, it's just a new, it's Lawson.
They should put all this stuff on their comments.
Are you talking about Tri-County? And the head start
There, one time there was actually a day,
swimming beach.
there's still a day, there's
So,
yeah, that started right over there. To the other side, where the front county is swimming, it's for the children.
But it's technically in about the same proximity to Head Start as it currently is to the current jail.
Well, I think we're looking for a better option. So that's something we should consider. In my opinion.
Any other questions or comments? Which stands alone with you guys?
With the elementary school, we moved to the other schools.
That's their plan, yeah, it's to not block, block Costco, we might go about it. So we don't have any comments.
well, I just, want everybody to have an opportunity to speak, and please do speak up and question or comment. And that's why we're here, is for you, that we are here, and all of you that have made communities. I appreciate that very much, thank you so much. And don't be shy, please be part of both that can help us get answers if we don't have them as we right. Don't be shy, no one know what your concerns are.
To see how much the crowd for Roberts.
I was just already, I was just thinking, like, when you think of all these three sites, the sheriff's department is linked to all these, so the further away you get from downtown, the further away you're putting the sheriff's department from responding to events in town, correct?
Correct.
So the site of the credit union is not far from the sheriff's department.
It's what, half a mile from the city limits? A little less.
So we measured it at a half mile,
Half a mile.
and that's to, for a different existing rules.
All right. I will thank y'all for coming. Thank you for your comments and questions. This is what this is about. This is what we wanted. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you guys for coming in tonight, for all your work. If you've got something on your mind, you want to write down before everybody leaves, feel free to. We'll collect all the comments and stuff, and we're gonna just that briefly. But again, appreciate y'all coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having this tonight and for letting us see the maps and pros and cons.
Thank you. All right, your motion adjourned.